I'm Susan Evans from the Governing Board of the British Acupuncture Council, and this evening we have two presentations for you. And the first is from the Brighton and Hove Acupuncture for NHS group. And we've got Cara Beckinsale and Anna Tarjan, who are going to tell us about the wonderful project that they have had going since June, when they decided they were going to offer acupuncture treatments to NHS workers during the lockdown. So it's a really interesting project they've got going. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that and how they've treated patients or the NHS workers, and some long COVID with that. So they're going to show us how the project came about and share some case studies with us. And then after we have had that presentation, then Susan Woodhead, who is a fellow of the British Acupuncture Council, is going to share how she is treating some long COVID patients with 5-element acupuncture. Susan trained in Leamington. She's also trained in nutrition, counselling and supervision. And she was a lecturer at the Southampton University Medical School. So she's going to be sharing her experience as well. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Anna Tarjan, who's going to start the Brighton and Hove presentation, and then she will hand over to Cara. So it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Susan. So good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Anna Tarjan, and with my colleague Cara, we're going to present to you our project, Acupuncture for NHS, Brighton and Hove. Can I just ask, can everybody see the slides? Just give me a thumbs up if you do, or a nod. Yes, that's excellent. Yes. So the presentation was prepared by our currently active team, including Claire Diola, who also did our great website, and Barbara Cook-Hyder, who made all the exciting pie charts and diagrams that you're about to see. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to very briefly tell you about who we are. We'll talk a bit about how this project is different from private practice. We'll tell you about our patients, including some juicy statistical data. And in the end, we will share our plans and mission with you. And there will also be time to answer any questions you may have. Our team, who is currently treating patients, includes our director, Cara Beckinsale, Claire Diola, and our regional BXC regional coordinator, Barbara Cook-Hyder, and me. We also had some other team members who were crucial in getting this project off the ground, namely Sora Levy, Rufus Jordan, who is always there to provide us with technical support, and Charlie Whitestone and Fraser Leckie, who gave a lot of their time to treating patients in the beginning. So how did this all start? How did we start the project? In March, when the lockdown happened, I thought, well, I'm an acupuncturist. I can do something about this. As acupuncturists, we can help. And I had absolutely no idea where to start. So I got elated by a message, an announcement on Facebook that was put out to BXC acupuncturists in April to come together and discuss, brainstorm ideas about how we could treat, how we could help the NHS frontline staff. And a lot of very experienced acupuncturists from across the country answered this call. They got together and brainstormed ideas about how we could treat, brainstormed ideas about safe practices, and lobbied for insurance so that we could treat during the lockdown. 4 of our Brighton members actually sat on those committees. So Cara, Sora, Fraser and me were in those main groups. And what tied us together, other than the obvious geography, is that we all felt a really strong sense of solidarity. We are healthcare professionals. We wanted to stand with the NHS and help them. And between us, we had great connections and a good skill mix that led us to be able to start the clinic. So Sora, for example, was working with 3 other practitioners in a multi-bed, namely Claire, Rufus and Charlie, who who were not on the main group, but they were really, really keen to help and jump on board. And Cara got us, well, through her connection at the Float Spa, she got us in touch with Camille Pearson, who offered us our amazing treatment space for free for the first month. Peter Deadman from the JCM paid our setup costs straight away. Balance and Oxford Medical sponsored us with equipment, and we got some funding from the British Acupuncture Council as well in September when we were already running. We also owe special thanks to Sandra Hart, who gave us a lot of her time and patience in helping us setting up our scheduling system. And after all that 6 weeks of work, of which actually a lot of the groundwork was done by Sora and Cara, it took us 6 weeks, and then we were able to open in lockdown on the 9th of June, offering 40 treatments per week, completely free of charge for the first month. Now we've evolved a little bit since, because obviously at the beginning we had our treatment space for free. As businesses started to open up, we started to pay reduced rent to the Float Spa so we could retain our lovely space. And also in the beginning, we gave treatments for free with the option of donation. However, we find that a lot of people who didn't pay anything then ended up not showing and not telling us about it, therefore taking the space from others who could have come. What we decided to go with is introducing a minimum charge and then an additional optional donation on top, which seems to be working. So we are running with that at the moment. How are we different from private practice? First of all, when we opened in June, it was still lockdown. And at the time, there was no guidance available as to what safe practice should look like. And for that, we owe a huge thank you to the main committee who developed our safety protocols during April and May. And it is by and large what everybody does now. Of course, there were sacrifices like introducing the not so glamorous plastic pillows that every patient loves, and also reducing our contact time with patients to only 15 minutes. Now, this meant that we had to change our treatment style as well. In the group, we come from a mixture of disciplines. Cara is a 5-element practitioner. Claire is a TCM practitioner who trained in China. I trained at ICOM. And we decided not to use treatment protocols, but to each use our own angles and different approaches. But still, because of that 15-minute treatment window, we had to think quickly on our feet as we would in a multibed, even though we were treating one-to-one. We also wanted to avoid patients getting undressed and dressed again, both from a time and an infection control point of view. So we went with the main committee's recommendation, and initially when the lockdown was really strict, we only used antique points, so points below the elbows and knees, and in some cases abdominal points, depending on the ease of access, depending on the patient was wearing. As the lockdown regulations eased, we started to include a wider selection of points. So we started to use back shoe points and more points on the abdomen as well. Again, the biggest asset of working in such a clinic was really our team, because our team is what makes this ticking. And as I mentioned before, that we all come from a different discipline. Through this project, we really managed to learn from each other and draw on each other's expertise. And what made this a lot easier is our cloud-based, systemized note-taking. Now, who here worked in a multi-bed clinic or worked with other practitioners, went in to treat a patient, got out the notes, only to realize that they couldn't read any of it? I know I can't see your hands, but I'm sure there must be at least one more person with the same problem. And I was really relieved that this way of note-taking has completely eliminated that problem. However, it came at a sacrifice. Again, we all had to adopt how we're taking notes, and we all had to be mindful of making sure that our colleagues understand what we're talking about, what we're writing down in our notes. For example, Claire, who trained in China, had to train herself off writing her points in Chinese so the rest of us mortals can understand her treatment principles. The other thing that made us really different or unique is that AccuTrack has been very closely collaborating with us, and they provided us with our cloud-based data collection and outcome measurement system. And how it works is through MyMop questionnaires. So those of you who don't know, MyMop stands for Measure Yourself Medical Outcome Profile, and it aims to measure the outcomes that are most important to the patient, because the patient leads the questionnaire, they write in their symptoms. So when the person comes for their first consultation, they fill out that questionnaire there and then with the practitioner. And that includes writing in their main complaint. Then they choose 2 symptoms and they grade each of them from depending on how bad they are. Then they choose an activity that their main complaint makes difficult or impossible to do, and they also grade or rate their general well-being. After that, the follow-up questionnaires go to the patient completely automatically, so to the patient's phone or email, depending on their preference. So we follow them up at week 2, week 4, week 6, week 8, and after that at week 12, 26, and 52. Therefore, this simple tool allows us to follow up patients for up to a year's time. And from here, my colleague Cara will take over and tell you a bit more about our patients and our statistics.
Hi, everyone. So I am going to talk about the other section of our presentation. So who do we help? So on the MyMop, it doesn't say the job role. You don't include your job role. But so what we're going to say here are observations. And we're primarily treating nurses, young GPs, junior doctors. We're sort of seeing the people that do the unflagging work at the NHS, the lower to middle levels of staff. We've seen some radiographers, some A&E doctors, some anaesthetists. We haven't seen any surgeons or any consultants. So the GPs and the hospital staff, their average age is around under 40 actually, and the nurses come up into their late 50s. And something that's quite interesting is that around 10% of the patients that come to see us are already signed off from the NHS. So that really correlates to our slide on stress and the type of conditions they're coming to see us for, that they've been signed off for. And in the NHS, from my observation, you're signed off between 2 weeks and 3 months. Our project's quite unique because at least 50% of our patients work in the mental health service. They're mental health workers, primarily nurses and psychologists, but they work for a specific trust locally that already had a very decent approach with wellbeing. And so they've been a good supporter of us, and they've kept our service afloat. It's an interesting demographic because there's a couple of conclusions you could draw. And one is that I guess people that primarily work in mental health are more likely to value their mental health, and they maintain and preserve it, and they can see that acupuncture is a possibility. And the other thing is that, in my opinion, I think that mental health is probably the least linear of all types of healthcare. So it might attract people who are less black and white, and people that are willing to try more alternative methods. So here we are, outcomes. And I thought we'd wow you with our first and best pie chart. So after nearly 6 months running the clinic, 88% have reported an improvement. And 62% report that they're improved or very much improved. So thank you very much, acupuncture, and well done. So who are our patients? So 52% were new to acupuncture, which, as Anna sort of said, could be to do with the lockdown. I think lockdown piqued their interest. There was no other, they couldn't have physio, they couldn't have massage, there was no other options to them. They couldn't go to the gym, they couldn't do anything social. So I think it became a talking point or something new. And some of the patients recognized that their stress had gotten so bad that they needed to address it. Now, we've got a statistic in there about 33% are non-meat eaters. And that's not because we're trying to figure out who eats meat in Brighton and Hove. And I can assure you it's probably about 60% vegetarian. We had a questionnaire that's quite detailed that they fill in before they arrive. And we added that question to perhaps flag blood zoo. Not that all vegetarians may have blood zoo, but if a woman put she had a heavy period and she was a vegetarian, I may think blood zoo rather than chi deficiency. So that was one of those little hints. So it's going to be no surprise to anybody in this watching this webinar that 84% of our patients are female. And I guess that just solidifies that women are more likely to seek help and continue with the style of treatment. And I'm sure that private practice is probably a little bit different, but I probably have 30% men in my private practice, 70% women. So at the age of our patients, I've already said that they're 60% are under 40. And I'm hoping that this represents a new wave in medicine where the younger staff are open to more different type of methods. And also, I guess it correlates to 40%, the under 40s in the NHS generally fit into the overworked lower to middle levels, and they need to seek treatment to, you know, their 55-hour weeks, their night shifts, the really on your feet type of work that they tend to do. So, number of treatments. This is an interesting slide. So, don't know if you guys can see the slide, but it's 46% one treatment only. So we've discussed this as the team, and I think our general consensus is that it links in with the intrigued with lockdown theory. So, oh, let's go and see what this is all about. And those 46% are the people that aren't really included in the MyMop statistics because they're very unlikely to have filled out the second MyMop. You need to do 2 for the statistics to work. So as a team, we could possibly look in the future about how to retain these people that only come once. But I suspect it was the intrigue factor, and it was free for the first month. So our mainstay that allows the service to continue is through follow-ups. And I think that most people come on average at least 3 times, 3+. So the main complaints. So this is really clear and quite specific to the NHS as a subset, and they're all triggered by major stress. So neck pain, neck and shoulder pain, lower back pain, insomnia, anxiety, and stress. So the graph there says 60% pain. We added, Barbara added them all together for us, but the neck and the shoulder pain, I think, tend to be together. And as Anna explained on the MyMop, all of these things that are listed on this slide are the things that they chose for their 2 things. So they might have had low back pain and anxiety. They may have had insomnia and a frozen shoulder. So we're really dealing with very specific types of complaints that are coming through this service. There's the odd deviation. Sometimes we have IBS, but we all know that IBS is exacerbated by stress. This could mirror our marketing, which was stress, anxiety, fatigue, because we didn't have we couldn't use all the points. So we started out with like a multi-bed quick fix. Not that we advertised it in that fashion, but that could be one of the reasons that statistic is there. So the chronicity of the main complaint, I like this one as well. I never thought I'd be into pie charts, but guess what? Getting to your middle age, you love them. So 45% had symptoms for more than over a year, and 25% are at least 3 to 12 months. So chronic complaints cost the NHS millions and millions of pounds a year. So here we have a unique subset of their staff, the complaints they're bringing in, and how chronic they are, and we've given them a solution with 88% improvement. So I'm hoping that they will see the dollar sign and see how much money will save them. So now we get into the juicy case studies. So a little bit about me. I'm 5-element trained at TAA, and we also learnt a good working knowledge of TCM, and I was always very drawn to TCM for its practical uses. I really liked it for first aid. And so over the years, I guess I've developed into a bit of a hybrid practitioner. I'm finding success in the NHS clinic combining the two styles. So I'm not focusing on the patient's element. This is not the right environment for that type of diagnostic. I'm mainly using entry and exit blocks, which can hold up the flow of chi. So a very famous one is the liver lung block. I'm using the bread and butter of 5-element, which is tonifying the back shu points. And I'm using internal and external dragons where there's an acknowledged or identifiable trauma. So this patient has got a real sense of adventure. She's a really interesting woman. I like her a lot. I think she's a fire CF. She's a mental health matron, early 50s. She has severe shoulder pain and neck pain on the right-hand side, plantar fasciitis, and she started treatment with us in July. So she presented her first treatment was an entry exit block. So the liver lung block that I was talking about, liver 14 and lung 1 tonified. I cleared the channel on the right-hand side, the large intestine where she was showing me where the pain was. I did 4 gates for pain, do 20 to lift the spirit Shen Men. In this treatment, we were having a bit of a chat, and I asked her, she works in a very high dependency mental health unit, so a lot of psychosis, a lot of really that type of quite heavy duty mental health issues. And I said, have you ever been assaulted at work? And she laughed, maybe because she's a fire CF. She laughed and said, oh, well, yeah, 30 years worth of assaults. So the next treatment, I thought, okay, she had less pain in general, but I decided to do external dragons. And these are often created by assault or a car accident or perhaps a negative situation in a relationship or with a bad boss, something that's been put on you externally. So do 20, bladder 11, bladder 23, bladder 63, and heart 7 tonified, which really hurts and is nobody's friend. I thought bladder 11 and 63 were relevant for shoulder pain and her fasciitis in that one. So treatment 3, shoulder and neck improved, but I went for internal dragons. Her and I got a nice rapport going, and I thought 30 years of working in mental health, she's very likely to have internal dragons. So sometimes they're created as a knock-on effect. So if you have EDs, you may have IDs. If you've had IDs, you may have EDs. Certainly if something's been held for a very long time. So I did Ren 15, master point, stomach 25, stomach 32, stomach 41, retained for 20 minutes. So in this treatment, she asked me what our plans for the project were and what my speciality was. So I saw a golden opportunity here, and I said, well, this particular style of acupuncture is really excellent with PTSD, and we're interested in helping mental health in the NHS with this style of acupuncture. So the shoulder and the back, this is treatment 4, shoulder and lower back, much improved. The plantar fasciitis is still an issue, but she's feeling a lot more robust to stress. So as you do in 5-elements, after you've done either of the dragons, you do an AE drain. So you all probably know what that is. You hold the needles very lightly through the yin organs, and it's to remove the aggressive energy that comes up from the trauma being released, I suppose. So bladder 13, 14, 18, 20, 23, you put 15 in last to protect the heart. And then obviously, she's very on board with a heart 7 being tonified. So the next treatment, shoulder's still really painful. She's had a very high stress level and she's had another physical scuffle with a patient. So this time she had a spleen heart block. So holding herself, trying to protect her heart, things aren't transporting and transforming. So I did clearing of the channel on the large intestine. I did yin, tang and shen men. And because I think she'd had a bit of a shock, the way she discussed this scuffle with a patient, I could tell it had shocked her. So I did heart 7 tonified for the shock. So Treatment 6. So things had moved, it was September, so things had moved into very careful practice. So things had improved, and I noticed that her reaction to stress was much better, but the shoulder was still really an issue. So I discussed pricking and bleeding, the small intestine and large intestine channels. And as I said, she's an adventurer. She was up for it. So we did that. And there was a lot of purple blood. And then I dealt with the plantar fasciitis, bladder 66 on the left-hand side, and kidney 63 and kidney 4 bilaterally. So Anna chose this slide, and I really like it. So yippee, her plantar fasciitis is completely resolved. And her stress is much more manageable, and the lower back and the shoulder has improved. So she's had 13 treatments to date, and I've started the back shoe from treatment 7. And her team has treatment through the service paid by the NHS. NHS is quite hard to say when you have to do a presentation. I should have thought about that when I took this project on. So, case study number 2. This is our long COVID one. Again, I'm really fortunate that these case studies are really lovely women that I've really engaged with. So she is a female in her early 40s. She's a trauma nurse. She has 3 children. She came to the service in the end of September. She's had long COVID since April. She went back to work and she collapsed on shift. So then she was signed off for 3 months. Her post-viral, she was diagnosed by the NHS by a number of practitioners saying that she had severe post-viral fatigue, extreme fatigue and muscle pain. She had debilitating headaches. She was on 4 prescription meds. And interestingly, she felt very let down by 3 different GPs and 2 physios, because the physios didn't know what to do about the muscle pain and the GPs just kept subscribing meds. And she felt very stuck. On the first appointment, I referred her to the Jade Screen Project, which are those fabulous guys that are doing the herbs. And she's very lucky, and she has Andrew Flower is looking after her case specifically. So she had a liver lung block as well. So now this is where I got into the back shoe points, and I thought her system's collapsed. I really need to boost her up. So bladder 23, 20, 18, 43, rich for the vitals. And I often do 12 body pillar, because it allows someone to lean against a pillar to feel like they're held up. And then I just use the strong command points to leave in while I leave the room. So I did kidney 3, spleen 6, liver 3. So quite an unexpected reaction. She came back after the first treatment and said a huge reduction in the muscle pains and headaches, and she'd slept and her mood was much better. So I thought, well, I must have done something right the first time. I carried on with the same back shoes, and I added 36, stomach 36. So she had a few days of the herbal prescription here. Treatment 3, she's feeling a lot better, and she's on her second prescription from Andrew. Her headaches are gone. She's off all the medication. Her muscle pain is 80% improved, and her spirit's coming back. She's grateful to feel her life coming back to her, but she's still reporting a tightness in the chest. So I did her pulses, another liver lung block. So I thought I better support the lungs, and I added bladder 13, and then just did something quite simple, because a liver lung block can be quite hardcore. So I just did some simple back shoes. So treatment 4. So she's maintaining her treatment gains, and the tightness in her chest is still remaining. And I wondered if she was anxious. So I queried about, she was due to go back to work, and she didn't feel she was ready physically or mentally. So I asked her if she was anxious about that. And then she said, well, actually, I've had a history of anxiety 2 years prior. So I thought, okay. So on this treatment, I addressed that. So I wanted to really boost her immunity first. So I did bladder 13, rich for the vitals again. I did kidney 27. I did lung 6 and lung 7. And then for her spirit, I did kidney 25, ren 17, and ren 14. So the next treatment, she came back and she said, listen, the tightness in my chest is much better. And I think you're right. I think it is anxiety. Her brain fog's returned, but her fatigue and her muscle aches are 90% improved, but she's got sciatica. So I did bladder 43, and I added bladder 14 for the pericardium this time because of the anxiousness about returning to work. And I did bladder 49, the one that stops you, is it thought dwelling? I think it's thought dwelling. Stops you overthinking. I did Archie points around L3. I didn't show her how big the needle is for gallbladder 30. And I did 34, 37 and 44, clearing the channel. And she's on her 5th week of herbs. So she comes back for treatment 6 and she says, Cara, my sciatica got worse. And I pulled the face, oh. And then she said, but then it completely resolved. And she said, I'm really nervous and anxious about return phase to work. It's very interesting for 5-element practitioners that a lot of these NHS staff have got liver-lung blocks. A lot. I'm seeing liver-lung blocks and spleen-heart blocks all the time. So I did kidney 7 to give her a boost, and then I did pericardium on the left and kidney on the right to do that heart-kidney access. And then my favourite point for water CFs, which I think she is bladder 58, flying scatter, to just bring in that fear. So I checked in with her. She said she'd had a really stressful return to work. She was highly anxious. She was weeping. She was stressed. She'd had insomnia for a few days. So she came in and I did the internal dragons, checked in on her again. And she said, 2 bad days, but then she said completely changed. The anxiety had completely gone. She had all this energy. She was sleeping and she didn't have that dread about work. So she still comes to see me. She's probably on her 8th treatment this week, and she's still continuing with the herbs with jade screen. So that's the case studies. And this is just the last bit about us. So I guess some of these will be quite obvious about what we'd like to do with the project. We have committed to try and continue until June 2021 so that we have a whole year's worth of statistics. We'd like to educate healthcare professionals about the difference between traditional acupuncture and short course acupuncture. This is a really very good point given to me by Claire. Because, you know, acupuncture in the NHS is done by nurses and physios, and it's what we would regard as a shell of a treatment. They're not getting the knock-on effects. Yes, their headaches may go away, but their sleep may not improve. They may just be getting pain sort of scenario. We'd like to support as many NHS staff as possible and as many as we can reach. I think it's already happening, but we're encouraging the staff to become advocates for acupuncture. It's helped them. I mean, why couldn't it help a patient? They may be more inclined to advocate for us on their wards or to send their own patient or recommend us. I know they're not, you know, allowed to do it directly. Why don't you try acupuncture? Use our solid outcomes data to gain recognition and help the case towards statutory regulation for the profession. I think I left one. Oh yeah, this is the one that Anna and I were talking about the solidarity. We want to embed with the health service that acupuncturists are reliable healthcare professionals so that they can count us, oh, chiropractors, osteopaths, oh, acupuncturists. That's really important for us as an organisation. Going forward for the next 6 months, we need to analyse our data and inform how to build a practice and a different business model and communicate with the people that have invested with us and our potential clients. And the last one, funding. This project doesn't rely on goodwill alone, I'm afraid. So if anybody out there has any ideas or knows some really good charities or knows some really good trusts that we could apply to, please get in touch with us so that we can put some applications in. And I guess there's another grant from the BXC coming up in February. And if you really connect with our project and you think it's great, why don't you champion us? Why don't you ask them, please, would you give these guys some money? I think it's really worthwhile. If you don't, that's absolutely okay. But the more they hear from the members how they'd like their money spent, that might be really a helpful way forward. So that's how to find us. Please send us an email if you've got some suggestions, and we can start some funding applications. Susan, do you want to open for questions?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I think it's a fascinating project. Really, yeah, I think you guys are doing really, really well. So I've got a couple of questions here. So Lisa Collins is interested in what the frequency of treatments was. Was it weekly or longer, or did that vary?
What do you think, Anna?
I think for most of my patients weekly, there were people who, so the people who came back 2, 3, 4 times, they often came weekly, and the ones who are ongoing definitely come weekly. I think mostly. However, there have been people who dropped off, and then now with the second lockdown, they came back again. But mostly weekly, I'd say.
Weekly, yeah.
Great. And then from TJ, it's there are more than 70% of cases received less than 3 treatments, which was one of your slides. May I ask, what's the total number of cases you have treated, and how many cases completed 3 and plus treatments?
Oh, TJ.
Those figures.
TJ, I don't know if we've got a slide for that one.
Sorry for that question.
I trust you. I know that when we were pulling one of the stats, and Barbara's done all this, I am not a tech person. I'm the talker, I'm not the tech. So I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had done 354 treatments. So that must mean we're about 360, Anna, do you think?
Something.
No. What, 354? We must be 380.
370, 380, something like that now.
Yeah, okay, so we'd be around 380 treatments. And I would say, as a guesstimation, 40% come more than 3 times. What would you think? It's a guess, TJ. We'll find out for you.
We are guessing that one. So I think that's one that we need to come back to you with and actually dig our heads in the data.
So, thank you for both. I'm looking forward to your final publication.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, TJ.
So have we got any more questions? I don't know if anybody's got a raised hand, but if you've got any more questions, if you want to quickly type a message. I just think the whole thing is fascinating, and I love the fact that you've got different practitioners doing different styles of acupuncture, which I think is a wonderful way to work. I think that's really, really lovely to hear that. So I don't think we've got any more questions.
Hello, I've got a question. Hi, I've lost myself on the screen. My name's Michelle Stones. I was a mental health nurse for 30 years, and I worked forensic. So basically my question is, were you able to reach nurses that worked maybe night shift? Were you responsive to shift patterns of nurses, so all nurses could actually access the service you provided? That was my first question, coming from a mental health background.
Mm-hmm. I guess when we were doing 40 hours, when we first started, we were seeing 40 people a week. We were doing 40 sessions. We were we were inundated. And that we tended to do half in the morning and half in the evening so that we could catch the beginning of a shift or the end of a shift. We haven't, now we do some appointments in the morning. So we offer 16 a week now. Some are offered in the mornings and some are offered in the afternoons, so that we can try and get the beginning and the end of the shifts. The trust that we're working with, that matron allows her staff time off to come and see us. And that specific trust within the NHS is very well known to letting their patients are allowed to put the time off in the diary saying, I'm going to see the acupuncturist, and they get the hour off. I know that's absolutely not the case with everybody else, but that is a specific trust that do have the mental health backup.
And then again, what I'd like to add to that is we do have the capacity to expand and work around. If we, let's say, if a ward said, okay, we have X number of nurses on a night shift, would you be able to treat them on a specific day? Chances are we would be able to accommodate them.
Great, so I have a couple more questions here. So how did you drum up your patients? Through advertising in the local hospitals, or did you actually get them?
Mixed avenues, really. We've got lots of posters and things in the hospitals now. We were overwhelmed, weren't we, Anna? Overwhelmed. We put on Facebook and something else, and then the people were just inundated. We were inundated because they needed it so much. And then the nurses primarily are very good advocates. They put them in their own WhatsApp groups. So they say, oh, I've just gone to acupuncture, and they've got like 100 people in their WhatsApp group. Where? Who? What days do they do? So they've actually advertised it for us. Claire did a fabulous job on our website, and that's really professional, I think, for a small little organisation. And that's, they can book there directly, and they can book on our Facebook. So when they find us, they can book straight away. They're not having to then go, oh, where are these people, and try to look for us. So I think that was quite helpful. Anna, anything else?
Yes, the other thing I was going to add was the well-being departments from the trust. So I have quite a few patients when I ask, how did you hear about us? Well, we got an email at work. So those when we got them to promote us, and that was helpful.
Okay, so just a couple more questions then. So could it be rolled out in all hospitals? And another then, if you had your time again, what would you do or set up differently? And I know Alan has his hand raised as well, so I'll come to Alan in a minute if you want to answer those.
Anna, do you want to do the regrets? I've had a few question, and I'll do the, could it be rolled out into hospitals? It's very difficult, which is what we found through the main committee. It's very difficult to treat on site at the NHS without a whole bunch of tests. You've got to go through a lot of, CPR checks, and you've got to get a lot of vaccinations. It's quite a complicated process. We're hoping that after a year's worth of really strong statistics with what we're trying to do with this project, that we can go into, the local area a little bit more deeply and see how we can expand into mental health wards, or if we can do pain clinics, and then we may be able to expand beyond.
Great. Alan, have you a question if you want to unmute?
Grand. Hi, yeah. Fabulous presentation, by the way, both of you. I'm curious from the patients, and I suppose I'm wondering about this because of the number of visits that the patients had, and so many coming 1 or 2 times. I'm curious if the patients were all coming to you with very much an open ethos, or if they were slightly cynical in their approach to the acupuncture treatments.
Anna, you take this one.
Yes, it's really mixed, actually. It's a great question, thank you, because I've certainly expected some real cynicism, and lots of them were open-minded, and a lot of them were like, well, I just wanted to give this a go. I'm not sure, but well, I'm here because nothing else is working. So it is a real mix, to be honest.
I just saw that. Hi, Julie. Julie Reynolds wants you to answer what you do differently, or I can help you.
What we do differently. So I think for me,
not do it, Joe.
In the beginning, when we opened, we thought, well, we open the clinic, we'll have a few patients, and we'll have things to iron out. Have some time to iron things out. And our first 2 weeks were fully booked in 3 days, and we went, now what? we've really got to get on the ball. So I would say be ready. If you're going to start something, be fully ready, because you don't know what might happen. I think we ended up rushing quite a bit in the beginning because we had to quickly put everything together. And in terms of sort of assess the demand as you go, which I think we've done. We've done well.
I sort of think that we sort of just ran at it with a lot of planning and a lot of late night Zooms and a lot of, to be honest, it was quite stressful because we didn't want to miss the window of opportunity. If we didn't open it then, would COVID be over in December or September? None of us knew. So we sort of had to go for it. And we had a lot of technical hitches. It's a really complicated system that we've got. It's not just, I guess it was paper note taking, but we couldn't touch paper and share paper together. So I guess there was a lot of areas that had to be really tech, and thank you, Sandra Hart. So all that tech stuff was really hard, and there was a lot of glitches and lots of bits and pieces going wrong. And that was difficult, but that's what you mean about being prepared, isn't it, Anna?
Yes.
We were, but it was, yeah.
Then again, so be prepared for the unexpected, because there will be things going wrong, and you just got to deal with it. So
you've got a perfect template for somebody else who wants to get going in their area.
we do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. I mean, that's fantastic. So listen, thank you both. Really enjoyed that. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm getting lots of thanks here. And Juliet said it's lovely to see a 5-element practitioner too on there. And well done for your efforts in raising the professional profile of acupuncture. So it's absolutely fantastic. So on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. Yeah, we're looking, we'll be interested to hear how this carries on. So yeah, best of luck with it all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for doing the slides.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
So now we'll move on to Susan Woodhead, who's going to talk to us about her 5-element treatments with long COVID. So thank you, Susan. It's all over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I gave the title to this talk as Long COVID 2020, a 5-element perspective and the experience of working with this condition. And what I'm going to address is the experience of treating patients with long COVID since the end of first lockdown, treatment planning for the CF, patient management, and the challenges for the practitioner, because those are the things that have come up for me. I'm speaking as a 5-element practitioner, and it was lovely to have 5-element in that last excellent presentation. I don't hold that any system of acupuncture is superior or inferior to any other. I trained in 5-element. That's what I did. I've never looked at training in any other system because I love working with 5-element, and I've done so for quite a long time now. And I'll be talking about what I'm doing from a 5-element perspective. In March, we had to go into lockdown. It was all very sudden. And when I phoned people to postpone their treatments and to speak to them, I gave them the assurance that they could still phone, leave a message on our answer phone, and I would be able to ring them back and talk to them and listen to them. Now, that's something that I extend, as I'm sure you all do, to every person between treatments if it's needed. That message was also on our answer phone. And there was no charge for this. We do this anyway, and we weren't going to have insurance. We weren't actually going to be working, but it was something that we could still provide for people, some of whom I felt very badly about having to postpone because they were in the middle of chemotherapy or they were going towards end of life. It was actually very difficult. to break contact completely with people. And people started phoning in for all sorts of reasons, and several of them actually developed COVID. Now, back in the autumn, 12 months ago, when we hadn't heard of this, you know, we were in that gloriously innocent state, weren't we, this time last year, there were some strange viral illnesses and coughs around in the area that I work in. Locally, there were people who had things like what we now call COVID toes. And it was interesting because chilblains don't really feature very much anymore. And yet people were coming in with oddly coloured, slightly swollen, uncomfortable toes and asking what it was. And I honestly had to say, I don't know. And their GPs weren't too clear either. People did get better after treatment, but I hadn't realised until there was information probably only about 3 or 4 months ago about that being part of COVID. So those things were around, and then we went into the situation of people ringing because they actually had COVID. They were suffering with coughs, fevers, breathlessness. They were contacting NHS 111. They were being told that they had mild cases of COVID and that there was nothing that needed to be done at that time. A lot of people were really aware that round about day 10 of COVID, things can either get better or they can get significantly worse. So there was a huge amount of anxiety, a huge amount of fear and worry in the people who were ringing and wanting somebody to talk to. GPs were available on the phone, but it was more difficult to get hold of them. People were being told that there was no treatment available. They needed someone to talk to. And then gradually, the long COVID symptoms were being reported. And people were telling me that they had cough and breathlessness, loss of taste or smell that was continuing, earaches, sore eyes, the sort of COVID conjunctivitis, which has now been identified, fatigue, brain fog. They were feeling muscle weakness. In their digestive system, they were getting bloating, diarrhea. They were feeling very cold, very chilled. That came up for several people. There was also the mental health aspect where people were reporting increased anxiety and depression, terrible fatigue, feeling anxious, feeling low. And I was talking to people, and with many of them, I suggested that they bought an oximeter so that they could check their oxygen levels. And if around day 9, day 10, their oxygen levels plummeted, then they were to immediately phone 999 and get themselves to hospitals. Because we were aware then of the silent hypoxia, the way in which this illness can suddenly become much, much worse. And it causes the body to go into crisis, and people can die very quickly within 24 hours of that happening. They do need oxygen, they do need help. I was also talking to people about food and diet, about them taking zinc and vitamin D. Zinc, because I've always thought of that with loss of taste and or smell. Somehow it does seem to be associated with that deficiency. And 1 or 2 people also told me that they had rashes on their chest. Again, back in March, April, May, I didn't really know whether that was associated with COVID, but again, during the summer, news and information came out about that being a symptom. And there was also the aspect of PTSD. I talked about that in a talk I gave in May on COVID and the metal element for the BACC as being something that could be around for people who had suffered severe breathing problems. I'd come across it before in those who'd had really severe pneumonia and been hospitalized and had had oxygen. And that real encounter with possible end of life had actually disturbed them greatly. So post-traumatic stress disorder could be a part of what we might see with some long COVID patients. It's certainly very evident in many of the people who were in the NHS and actually working in ICUs. It was reported in Italy, it's been reported in China, and I think also in our own hospitals, the people who so very clearly were involved in the first wave and now in the second wave are under a huge amount of stress and pressure, and PTSD may well be part of their long-term after effects. And I was very aware that I hadn't been able to do treatments for the people, the wood spring treatments or fire summer treatments in the correct season. People had been left without treatment, and it's noticeable to them and to their families. And then looking at the long COVID NHS website definition, it gives the list of crippling fatigue, respiratory problems or chronic cough, persistent headaches, brain fog, sleeplessness, cardiovascular problems, chest tightness, heart failure, acute myocarditis, protracted loss of taste or smell, gastrointestinal problems such as diarrhea, liver and kidney dysfunction, mental health problems including depression, anxiety, cognitive difficulties, concentration being affected, brain fog. And the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has said that 6 months on, it is young people, he's defined it as young people, who are largely suffering with long COVID. The chair of the Royal College of GPs, Dr. Martin Marshall, has said that long COVID is going to be a real challenge for patients and the health service. That was a quotation in the last few weeks. And they are saying that there are 60,000 people that the NHS is aware of who are suffering with long COVID. And that was the figure in early November. So that's the background. And I began to think about when people might be coming for treatment as we were opening up again, and in different parts of the nation. I know we've opened up at different times, but people had been talking to me on the phone and saying, when can you see me? You know, when can I get an appointment? When can I have some help with this? They were phoning their GPs and they were not really being offered anything. I mean, some were being offered omeprazole for the digestive problems, didn't really seem to help them very much. A lot were being told to take painkillers. Some were being offered antidepressants or medication for anxiety. And they felt that that wasn't really what the main problem was, that wasn't really what they were looking for. And so with treatment planning, before I saw them for treatment, I began to consider the effect of not having had seasonal treatments. These are people that I had worked with for some time. And so I had an idea of how they would perhaps normally be. I had questions about the sites that the virus had affected in individuals, because I was reading more about the fact, you know, we started off thinking it was lungs and respiratory, and it was something like a very bad pneumonia. And then the American doctors talked about it as being akin to an altitude sickness when they were looking at it in April in New York. And then we found out about all of these other areas that it affects within the body, causing damage, long-term inflammation, long-term effects. So I was beginning to think about that with the people I'd spoken to and the information that they'd shared with me. I had, in telephone conversations, heard that there were new sounds in their voices or indications of fatigue in the lack of strength in their voices. And those of you who are 5-element practitioners will know that one of the signs that we look for is the sound within the voice. It's one of the things that we use in determining the causative factor, the main element of the person that needs treatment and that will help to resolve things. And the sounds were changing. In some people, there was more of a slight sound of a weep. In other people, there was that groan of water. And it was interesting listening to those differences when I was able to talk to them on the phone. At the first appointment post-lockdown, masks were being worn. I had my PPE on, they were going to wear masks. And I very much wanted to see the colour. Again, another one of those interesting, diagnostic, helpful things that we rely on when we see somebody. So I took to being at the door of the clinic as people approached. And I could see mostly people don't put their masks on until they absolutely have to. And in daylight, the colours could be seen. And I was able to do that, to try and have a look at them before the mask went on. And then there's only perhaps a tiny area on the temples. But I could still have the sound of the voice. I could still work with the emotion, and I still had the odour. So I had 3 legs of the stool to work with. In taking a full history of what had happened since their last treatment, a huge amount of information was given. In reading their pulses, I noticed many changes in the quality and the quantity of energy. It's not always been what I'd anticipated from the conversations or from previous experience of treating them. And that has been really interesting. That's been really quite remarkable, because I had a series of ideas or expectations based on what I already knew. And the big realization was, this is a novel virus. This is something we haven't met before. We haven't come across it before, thank goodness. And here it is, and it's not quite like anything else, and it's new. And so that was a real learning experience, to actually look at it and see that there were things there that I hadn't encountered before, and I had to think about them and how I was going to work with them. I was thinking about the element, I was thinking about the season, the time of day when symptoms manifest or ease up. The points were chosen on knowing the person and the causative factor. So I already had ideas from having spoken to them over a period of months of what might be needed, what might be useful. I was looking at the level of body, mind, and spirit, and where for each individual, I felt that they were having the main problem. And for some people, it was very physical. The real fatigue, the real muscle ache, the real difficulties with their coughing and their digestive system. And for other people, it was more to do with the anxiety, the depression, the sheer relentlessness of weeks and weeks and months with this condition going on, and no sign of it getting any better. For some people, it was coming in waves. You know, they would have a few days of feeling absolutely dreadful, then they'd pick up a bit, then they'd go down a bit. They'd walk to the corner shop and they'd be in bed for a couple of days. It was really difficult for them to see how they would eventually get better. And my experience in actually taking the pulse and looking at it was, this is not the same as the ME that I've seen over the years. Now, back in the 1980s, there were a lot of people who came for acupuncture with ME, because at that time it wasn't recognized by the medical profession. People were seen as being, really quite troubled, and it wasn't acknowledged as the physical problem that it is. So a lot of people came with ME. Thankfully, all of them did seem to get better. All of them were able to go back to work. And I've always thought acupuncture is a tremendously helpful and useful treatment for ME, along with guidance on lifestyle, diet, all of those other things that we put in as part of caring for our patients. So I've been treating that since the 1980s, but this didn't look like that. So with patient management, there were expectations. There was their expectation and there was mine. And this was much more difficult because it's a novel illness and not enough is known about it and the long-term effects. I mean, when I've treated someone with hepatitis or malaria, something that I hadn't come across before, yeah, it was new to me, but there was a huge amount of information about it and a lot of resources that I could look to, and a very good chance of there being a very good and positive outcome. But with this, I really didn't know. And truthfully, I still don't know what the outcome might be. So how to reassure and help people when no actual certainty exists? I found that very difficult. I found that very challenging. In other conditions, as I say, even if you've never treated it before, you can research it, you have an idea. And so you can be more upbeat, more confident when you're talking to people about what might happen to them. But with this, we honestly don't know. We honestly don't know. In my conversations with people before treatment, in phone calls, I'd given guidance around diet, foods, supplements, avoiding alcohol, appropriate exercise, breathing exercises to help people, because with the anxiety and with the breathing difficulties they were having, often getting them to do some relaxation breathing was very, very helpful. They could measure on the oximeter that their oxygen levels were going up, and it helped them to feel better, and also helping them to think about breathing at night and getting through the nights in a slightly better way. So looking at those things, and then during treatment and afterwards, again, talking to them about foods, water. Some had had blood tests, and with those, it's possible to suggest such things as increasing their protein, foods to maybe help them top up their iron levels, their calcium or the vitamin D, if those things are looking low. I had one person come to me who'd had blood tests done via a private GP, and although she was told she was within the normal range, all of her readings were at the much lower level of where they should be. We didn't have any previous blood tests. They hadn't been necessary in order for us to be able to compare and see what had happened. But her system seemed to be really depleted. And so we did some work on how she could adjust her diet in order to get those resources back into her system. And what it indicated to me was how much her body had struggled to actually overcome the active virus, and how it had depleted the body of vitamins, minerals, and really caused a big problem. And since working on that, things have improved with her bloods. So I'll talk a little now about 3 cases, and I'm aware of time, so I will go through them fairly swiftly, but if you have questions, I'm willing to answer them, just checking the time. The first person is an RCF and Fire Within. During lockdown, they had COVID. Someone in their household had been abroad, came back with the cough, the breathlessness, the fever, and they got it within about 5 days. They had earache, dry cough, sore eyes, inflamed lower intestine, soreness, sore stomach, phenomenal abdominal bloating, and exhaustion. In the past, they had suffered with ME, and during 2007 had seen me for treatment for that and had recovered well and had gone back to work, and in fact had thought they'd put the ME behind them. And they're one of the people who said to me that this is not the same as the way they felt with ME, but they feel confident that the acupuncture will help them as it has done before. I looked at draining the aggressive energy using the associated effect points of the lung and the points associated with both parts of fire, because when they came to see me, it was their fire energy that was the lowest. So both heart and small intestine and the 3-heater triple burner and the heart protector pericardium. those were the areas that were absolutely low energy, both in terms of quality and quantity. And I used the source points of small intestine 4, heart 7, and I also used the heart protector 7 and the 3 heater triple burner 4. Now, I wouldn't normally do all 4 source points together, but the situation was so low that I thought I'm going to work on it and just layer after layer of 5 points. There was a huge improvement in her colour. Her breathing changed while she was on the couch. And I didn't go and treat in the earth because I got a sufficient change in terms of what the body was showing me and telling me that I thought we'd see how that went. They came back and said, there's been an improvement. The tummy pain has gone, still a bit swollen, but gone. And I've had what I describe as deep sleeps, as opposed to this fatigue sleep. So I then worked on the water points within the heart and the small intestine. And they came back after that and they reported that they'd been feeling better and that the cough, earache and sore eyes had been considerably better. And that they felt there was an improvement in the viral symptoms. They were feeling a bit more lively. I then worked on water energy in the next treatment, doing bladder 64 and kidney 3. And then I did the water points of spleen 9 and I did stomach 1. And when they came back then after that, they said, I've been feeling much better, no headache, cough or sore eyes. And I've been able to attend a family event and cope with it. And my bloating has gone down. I'm feeling easier. When I worked with them then, as well as using acupuncture points, and I did fire points and I then tonified the earth, I also did some Bowen moves to help reposition their diaphragm because the bloating had gone down sufficiently and because they'd had a lot of coughing, their diaphragm had moved up. And I'm a Bowen therapist. I've been a Bowen therapist since 1996. And sometimes I will, if it's going to be helpful, add in 1 or 2 Bowen moves for a person towards the end of an acupuncture treatment as an addition. I think it's just, little tools in the tool bag that you can add in that might be helpful. Also, brilliant move for colic in babies, works every time. So I did that and they came back and they said that the bloating had improved a lot and that was good. Then they had the flu jab, which they felt was a very good idea. They did talk about it. They had the flu jab and all of the symptoms started again. So it really knocked them back, knocked them sideways. And they described the fatigue as being really bad and their pulses were back to being very low. And this time their lung and large intestine pulses had dropped considerably as well. So I worked on those and I worked on the earth energy as well. They came back then and said that on the whole they were improving, but in waves things were happening. And again, I worked on the small intestine and the heart energy, and I used the source points in the earth element. And they came back after that. They were saying that it was so much better. They were exercising again, and they felt that they were about 7.5 out of 10 in terms of their recovery. So overall, things have been getting easier. There are improvements. And they've reported they feel it's helping the immune system. They no longer feel the brain fog and mental fatigue, no more headaches. They're back at work and they can concentrate. Cough and earache virtually gone, digestion good, and feeling much better. So that one has worked reasonably well, and we hope to see them fully recovered, because I've been worried about these people as we go towards the winter where the energy naturally is going to go down. If they're not fit before we get to the winter, then they're going to be so much more challenged, and we've got to keep them going. This would normally be a time for nice autumn and winter consolidating treatments, but I haven't got to those yet. The next person, I will go through this quickly, another earth person, this time wood within, who had seen me in February for some treatment, had then gone off skiing in northern Italy, which turned out to be one of the flashpoints for the infections in Italy shortly afterwards. We spoke during lockdown. They'd had COVID symptoms. They were very, very worried, day 9 and 10. I can remember they rang, I was talking to them. They wanted to speak to me every day. I said, of course, that's absolutely fine. I will ring you every day and use the oximeter. Let's make sure, you know, you're not going to get into trouble with that. They had high fever, they were delirious, pain in the joints, fatigue, and the NHS 111 diagnosed a mild case of COVID. Dread to think what the not mild cases are like. Then in the family, children had it as well. It was in the house. Then they developed laryngitis. They had lesions on their face like burns, digestive system, bloating and nausea, thirst, dehydration. They'd lost muscle tone. They were too tired to walk. And although they were starting walking by the time they came to see me and building up slowly, they were feeling really bad. So again, I had a look, and this time the pulses indicated that there was a husband-wife imbalance. The left-hand pulses were all much weaker in terms of quantity and quality than the right-hand pulses. And it was that sliding down almost into paralysis feeling that you get with that condition. So I did kidney 3, bladder 67, kidney 7, liver 4, and then I added heart 7 and small intestine 4. So getting everything over into the left-hand pulses. They came back 2 weeks later, that was the timing of our treatments, and said there was still some tiredness, but they were back at work and they were in the gym 4 days a week. And they actually said, that's amazing after COVID, isn't it? I thought, absolutely extraordinary. You know, did you have any other sort of treatments? No, just the acupuncture, fine. The small intestine and digestion was a little bit difficult. So again, I worked on the small intestine and then started working on the earth energy. And they came back after that and said work was very busy and they had had to do a lot of sorting. Well, I hadn't talked about that when I did small intestine, but they were talking about they were really overdoing it on sorting because now they were able to go back to work. And because of that, they were feeling tired and negative. So we worked on that. And they also wanted to have some Bowen treatment because they were in a great deal of physical pain. And they're a person who sometimes does have Bowen with me because they play a lot of sport, they run marathons, and the Bowen is very useful. Hadn't treated their wood in spring. So we did the Bowen. They came back and said the energy was a lot better, but still a bit of the tiredness. And then I did an autumn treatment using lung 9 and large intestine 4 with the metal in the earth of stomach 45, spleen 5, and I added in stomach 42. And then because they were so much better and their energy would take it, I did governor vessel 20, which I think is a magic point. And just put it in. I said, I'm just going to do a point on your head. And with that, they came alive. You know, they really changed. Oh gosh, that was interesting. And they came back about 3 weeks later and said, I've been okay. I think that head point was powerful. I'm working hard, and can we have that point again? So, you know, again, they've improved. They have improved. And then the third case, just very briefly, of a young person who was brought to me in their early 20s, who'd had lung problems since November last year, sharp pains that would wake them up. They'd been skiing and they'd caught this awful, what they thought was a chest infection. They got in touch with the NHS 111. They tested positive for COVID and they isolated in March. They had heavy pressure on their lungs feeling. They had fever, headaches, sore lungs. They were in bed for 2 weeks. Alternate days were easier and much worse. The cough was constant. On the phone, the GP said take ibuprofen, but it made no difference to them. And by August, they were much worse with pain in their lungs, and they had not been able to lie down to sleep. They were sleeping, sitting up, propped up, and out of breath at night, bending forward in order to breathe, eyes watering. They had the COVID eyes, and they were awake 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. in pain most nights. Classic. And the GP who they'd spoken to on the phone said, no, you can't have a blood test. Just try taking ibuprofen, see how you get on. I opted to do Bowen with them because they'd been sleeping, sitting up, and their posture was so awful and they were in such a lot of physical pain. I did a Bowen treatment with them, propped up on my couch with the backrest at a good angle for them. And I did a little bit of acupressure on lung 9 and large intestine 4 and on liver 3, because they were actually quite angry about the way in which they couldn't get treatment on the NHS. And they had to see me 3 weeks later. They have to come quite a long way. Someone goes and fetches them and drives them to me and said, it's been better. I've been sleeping more hours, upright, apart from half an hour when I feel some pain. Pain is much better, still there. From noon till the end of the afternoon, I have no lung pain at all. And at the second treatment, they were much brighter, much more talkative, much more engaged. The first one, they were just worn out from not sleeping, and things were bad. So we did the second one and left it for them to get in touch with me because they're some way away and might have been going into another tier of lockdown. And I had a lovely message from them saying, I'm really much, much better. The pain's virtually gone. I'm back at work again. And could my friends have some treatment? So that was a Bowen approach, which again, you know, interesting, but it was because of the posture and because of the difficulties. So the challenges for the practitioner, I think, were initially of not being able to treat people. If we'd been able to see them sooner, would the long COVID have developed? That's my big question. If I'd been able to intervene, I mean, we've always treated people with viruses. People with colds will ring up and say, oh, I've got a bit of a cold, shall I come? Of course you can come, we can treat you. As a practitioner, you know, that's what you do. That's what we've been doing for years. And initially not being able to treat them may have been letting them down. We did it for the best possible reasons, to save other people's lives, but they did need treatment. And now that's changed, we can see them. I think the challenges were feeling that I had no experience of this condition, keeping people going without creating false impressions and expectations. I tend to work with a positive outlook, but that had to be modified as I didn't know what would happen. Unfortunately, there have been good outcomes with all the people I've seen, and some of the people who look like they were going to long COVID have got a lot better with dietary advice and other things. And in future, I would prefer to see people sooner after they've had a negative test result and start treating before they go into long COVID. That's my hope. So that's the end of what I wanted to say, and I'll hand back to Susan.
Thank you. That was amazing. It's just so interesting to hear, you know, different approaches to, you know, to what we're looking at. And because I haven't seen anybody yet with long COVID, I'm storing all this stuff up for when I do. And I get you about the colour with the faces. It's so hard. I even find odour very difficult with a mask on as well. So yeah, it has its difficulties for 5-element practitioners, well, for everybody really. So thank you so much. Have we any questions there? I think you covered everything so well. That was wonderful. And I just want to say thank you. That was a lovely presentation. And it's really interesting that, you know, acupuncture really does seem to have some answers for people suffering, you know, with long COVID. So hang on, we've got some questions here coming in. Yeah. Hang on, let me see. Susan, how many patients have you treated so far?
With long COVID or in my life?
It doesn't question.
Probably long COVID. With long COVID, 6. Yeah, and they're all doing well. They're all doing well. Yeah.
And why do you think GV20 worked so well?
Well, it is the most magical point, isn't it? On the top of the head, 100 meetings. It is the great reunion point of all the meridians. Now, it's never going to be one that you're going to use on a first treatment because it just blows everything amazingly into a different dimension, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think when the person was getting stronger, there was enough energy there was more balance in the pulses. There was a difference in the person. You know, if you use a very big spirit point too soon, it's almost sort of wasted. It's not going to be sustained by everything else that's available in that person's energy. And so having done the source points and having made sure everything was steady, you can add it and it increases everything. And it's a point I love. I use it a lot on people who are going through chemotherapy, and it always has really, really good effects. It's one of the ones you'd want to take to a desert island with you. It's just
it's a lovely point. Yeah, I agree. So thank you, everybody. I really, really appreciate everybody being here. And so we've got a few more sessions. Next week, we've got Anne Cecil Sterman joining us from New York, who's going to be talking about her experiences treating people with long COVID. And then the week after, on the 9th of December, we've got Peelin's Sun. Okay, so thanks, everyone. Another lovely evening, and I will see you next week for Anne Cecil Sterman.